Olá, boa tarde,
Hello, good afternoon,
bom dia, boa tarde, boa
good
noite,
day, good
dependendo de onde
morning,
você
good
estiver.
afternoon, depending on where
Meu
you
nome é
are.
Valenzuela
My name is
Mogilansky,
Camila Valenzuela
sou líder
Mogilansky.
de
It
dança
is a
da
great
UERJ
joy to
e
welcome
no
all of
segundo
you
encontro da
to our
série
second encounter in the seminar
Educator.
series, Presence Technologies in Times of Absence. I'd like to start by thanking the great organizing team who made this event possible. Emérita, Esteban, Lilian, Ivanilson, Tatiana e Rafael. Além disso, um agradecimento especial ao André Ficker, que vai, who will make the simultaneous translation, and Marcelo Contígio for the creation of the visual identity of this event. I'd also like to thank São Paulo's Federal University and the Nucleus of Health and Substance Use Research, CAPES Sprint, and Mata School of Corporal Phenomenology for their support. Before beginning the subject that unites us today, I refer to some logistical aspects. First, we have a simultaneous translation to English for who is in the Zoom room. I repeat this in English now. So to access the translation, you go to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and you'll find the interpretation icon. It looks like a small globe. Click on it and it appears a pop-up window with the option English, and you should be able to listen to the English translation. We also post these instructions in the chat. If you have any problems, ask some of the members of the organizing teams in the chat. Relating the dynamics of the discussion. This time, we will open the microphone after the translation. But if you prefer, you can send your questions by writing during the presentation or after the presentation through the link which we will post in the chat. So you can send your questions through the form you can find in this link. If you have any doubts regarding these or other practical questions, you can contact any member of our organizing team, which they are identifiable in their names by the words team equipe. So now we go back to the objective of this series of seminars. In a time where we face several global challenges like climatic and environmental crises, unprecedented levels, wars, humanitarian crisis, political turmoil, we find it imperative to reflect upon the potential of present technologies to face these challenges. The term technology usually brings to mind images of computational and digital progress, uh, digital dispositives, virtual spaces, and artificial intelligence, which permeate different domains of our lives. Although they are benefic in several aspects, these developments cannot solve the urgent problems we face. Although, but several times they actually make these challenges greater, like when they aggravate the climate crisis, they worsen mental health, and they enhance political polarization. So we have to recognize the destructive or constructive potential of such technological developments does not depend on technology itself, but on how we use it. Our objective is to emphasize that certain human practices which allow us to develop profound comprehension and management of our bodies and minds constitutes technologies in itself. These practices reshape our relation with the environment, and they include technological artifacts such as ourselves and others. With this understanding, we define presence technologies as the total amount of practices and knowledges which deepen our involvement with our own experience. More specifically, in this seminary, the notion of presence in technologies includes ancestral methods of interaction with our environment and our body, psychophysical trainings associated to artistical practices and somatical approaches, meditation and mindfulness and movement practices, therapeutic techniques which enhance sensorial perceptions, and research methodologies which are centered in the lived experience. So the objective of the seminars is to give a platform for interdisciplinary reflection regarding these presence technologies. Some questions which serve as an axis for this reflection are: what does the presence imply in terms of attention, experiences, socially, and even physiologically? Which are the characteristics of the practices that develop them? What do these practices teach us relating to alternative ways of acquiring knowledge? And finally, what is the relevance of the presence technologies today? Last month, Professor Tim Ingold opened a series of seminars with a reflection regarding the technological development and the ability and the use of our fingers. More specifically, how the transition of the use of the fingers to the hand to the use of just the points of the fingers involved a series of perceptive cognitive changes and even affective changes which transform our relation with words. Today, you have the pleasure of receiving Professor Dani Lima, who will approach the question of presence, inviting us to bring our attention to the interior of our body in a reflection regarding the cellular presence. Professor Dani Lima is an artist and a researcher of the body and the movement. She has been acting for 40 years in the context of Brazilian contemporary dance. She is a somatic educator through the body-mind centering, a master in theater through the University Uni-Rio, a doctor in literature, culture, and contemporaneity by PUC-Rio. She is a teacher in the course of scenic arts of PUC-Rio and the Institute of Arts in Rio. She has been directing her own company since '97. Thank you, dear Dani. Now, Dani is speaking. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Listen to me. I would like by thanking Camila Moggi, who invited me, and Amata School of Corporal Phenomenology, and to all the realizers of this event, and to say it is an honor and a joy to me to be here next to so many researchers I admire. I'd also like to thank Andre, who is doing the simultaneous translation, and to everyone who is present today. I will share my screen now. Can you see okay? So, when Camila invited me to be in this seminar, I reflected about what could I approach. So I decided to approach a research on cellular presence, which is a kind of research I've been involved with for a long time. I would like to bring some concepts which will base the whole conversation. So one of them is the idea of somatic education. There was a cut in this line. The slide is so just remembering somatic education is art and the science of the process of synergic interaction between conscience, biology, and environment, as proposed by Thomas Hanna. It is a field of several bodily practices which have in common the field of viewing the body as a live organism, which is always in exchange with the means and is in continuous transformation. Some general principles which apply are the emphasis on the first person and the somatic authority, opposing the imposition of ideas about what to reach, and the attention given to the globality of the gesture and the indissociability between the anatomic, the synesthetic, and the emotional, the symbolic, the cognitive, and the spiritual body. A holistic perspective of the subject opposing a mechanicist perspective, where the learning of the movement is given by imitating and repeating. The works regarding perceptions are centered on a vision of the potential transformation and enhancement of our bodily capacities and subjective capacities through work on movement. Body-mind centering is a somatic approach centered on the empiric study and exploratory practice of anatomy and physiology by means of the bodilization of different communities and cellular systems. It was developed by the occupational North American therapist Bonnie Bandridge Coyne and her researchers, starting in the 70s on the United States, and it has been developing through several schools of formation and research to these days in several countries around the world, including Brazil. But this is Bonnie Membridge. She goes on to today giving online courses to this day. So following the flux of this maritime current, I will navigate here today with you, sharing my learnings and experiences through the contact with the body-mind centering, and not the truth with a big T. Now, I'd like to bring two quotings as true north for our navigation. The first quoting is the quoting of a spider who talks through a murmur to a scientist, an arachnologist, who hears and processes this humming in terms of a vibratory process. Both are protagonists of account, the silent singers from the philosopher Vinciani Despret. Says the spider, in a world where the sensibilities are in extinction, you should know how to better occupy yourself with your magnetic receptors. The other quoting is by Bonnie Cohen, and it says, my method of studies and research was to find myself in the life of the cells in my body, to differentiate each tissue, to integrate every cell in the context of my being as a whole, and to taking my consciousness back to my inconscient and sharing this process with others, always open to the constant changings in our bodies. So the first question I like to make is, have you ever stopped to think about how you relate to the cells inside your bodies? To each cell. This is an image called Amazonida. And there is a poem by Marcia Waina Kambeba. Life started in water about 3 billion years ago, as we know, with unicellular organism, one cellule, uncertain amount of liquid enveloped by a membrane, float in the ocean. Through time and through numerous processes of symbiotic cooperation between living beings, these beings became developed, became more complex, multicellular beings, and these beings became the agglomerates of living beings like us, who are not an individual and unique organism, but a community of about 30 trillion cellular organisms, more than 40 trillion bacteria, and other millions of fungus. As the biologist Lynn Marcus points, we humans are actually holobionts. That means symbiotic groupings enmeshed made of several interactive relationships in complex dynamic systems. We were never individuals, at least not from the biological stance. Today we know the importance of bacteria present in our digestive system, with which we have a relationship of mutual cooperation needed to survive. And also through the mitochondria, the cellular organelles, which process transformation of sugars and oxygen to energy, and which one day in a remote past were bacteria which invaded our cells and just lived inside them. And what we know about cellular life? Cells are the last and simplest material unit, which is capable of generating the process of doing itself, which characterizes life. I quote Lynn Marcus: life is a process, a way of behaving, and cells, they guide this process, feeding, exchanging, excreting, reproducing itself to make more and to grow. Life is always expanding, making more of itself, and creating itself, which is the simplest and smallest unit which can make more of itself, a cell. There is nothing more simple than a cell with this capacity to make more and grow and make more and grow. Cellular structure involves such an advanced technology in a level that is so infinitely microscopic, which science can't even completely grasp it yet. Each cell has the same biochemical mechanisms, and each cell conducts the same activities directed to survival that our body and our subjectivity as a whole conduct, which is breathing, ingesting, digesting, eliminating food, electromagnetic polarity, fluid circulation, reproduction, specialized substances production, sensibility, responsivity, vibration, and rhythm, a limit that which distinguishes internal and external experiences, movement in itself through space, resonancy, communication with other cells, survival instinct, a memory, transmission of memories, conscience of itself, purpose, habit, adaptability, capability of making decisions, ability to responding to its environment, to seek shelter, to escape from danger, degrees of health, and following life moments, which are birth, growth, maturity, and death. When we can have memory of processes throughout evolution, since the unicellular organisms to the pluricellular beings such as us, we can say that 1/3 of us, of what we are compounded by 2/3 are compounded by water, and the other third is compounded by the cellular matrix. Throughout this trajectory through time, there are several processes of adaptability and mutation, which developed specialized functions, which created differentiated cellular communities, which became the different tissues of a multicellular body. Nervous tissue, we can see in the screen, bone tissue, muscle tissue, and so on. So here we have this image in purple is the wall of an artery. This image, the blue one with red in the center, red formation in the center, these bodies are not real colors. These are colors created to allow us to identify these organisms. They are projected into the microscopic image. So this one, which has a hole in the middle, is crossed, bone cell. This one in the middle, a fiber muscle. The skin underneath, below, so neural tissue, nervous tissue, the neurons. The cells of a same tissue or system share certain patterns of behavior, of form, certain particular conscientious qualities of perception, of attention, of sensibility and purpose, which can be designed as the mind of a certain community, cellular community. It might seem odd to speak about a cellular mind or conscience, but it is evident that cells and other unicellular organisms which were able to survive for billions of years, adapting themselves and changing themselves to come to this day, are that given they have intelligence. We're talking about an intelligence which speaks of the capacity to feel and make decisions, move between many other cellular abilities we've seen before. Margulies proposes that these basic relationships of interaction and exchange with the environment may be considered as physical thoughts, which are vague and clear at the same time. A thought which would be a type of cellular activity. So quoting Margulies, the processes of perception, conscientious, and memory are originated in the invisible microscopic world, and they manifestate today in multicellular complex beings as us, as manifestation in large scale of the communal ecology of small scale made by unicellular ancient organisms. This process, which guided the primary interaction of beings and unicellular beings with their environments, these processes go on with the trillions of micro units of life which constitutes us. This perspective confers to cells, as it does to bacteria and all unicellular organisms, the role of entities doted with sensibilities, consciousness, and power of action, which have ancestral knowledges. They also call attention to the connection between all the living life to the cellular matrix, man, plant, fungus, animal, microbiotes related to codependence and reciprocity. So I would like to ask you, take your attention to your body for a few minutes. What is present in you now? We don't really think about the cells as a presence. Our Cartesian inheritance informs us that what is more intimate is different and separate from the body matter. The mechanicist Cartesian philosophy, which began in the 17th century, it began a separation between body and soul, which delegated the body to the domain of inanimate matter and nature, and spirit as a divine blow of bodily mechanism. This way of seeing the world is still very much responsible for the edification of the knowledge of the culture in the Occident, in the Occidental culture, and is responsible for this perception, which has a separation of matter in one side and consciousness in the other, body to mind, nature to culture. So in this image, Western culture, the word was Western. Can you all see it well? Can you see it? Okay, so the word anatomy, for instance, ana, separation, parts, separation in parts, pieces. This word, it makes clear that the notion of anatomy is born fundamented, is born upon the cut between the anatomist, the surgeon, which molds the way we understand and imagine and think about bodily matter. This anatomy, as it is represented, goes back to the treaty Dies Humanis Corporis Fabrica from 1543. I don't know if you can see this image. It is the second page of this tome, from the important anatomist Andreas Vesalius. It is the painting of him dissecting a female body. This was considered the most important anatomy book of the Renaissance, and it had a great influence to developing biomedical sciences, and to this day it is taught in medicine schools and is present in anatomic maps. So this is versus exploring the visceras, the viscers of the body, the inner stomach, and dissecting it. The philosopher and feminist writer Silvia Federici says, I quote, It is an epistemological revolution conducted through this. It is from the epistemologic revolution conducted in the 16th century that comes a mechanicist paradigm. The cut, it cuts the what united the microcosms with the anatomical cut cuts the bond between microcosm and microcosm, and it represents the body as a reality separated as a production element of a factory. Throughout scientific modernity, this foundational metaphor has perpetuated itself throughout until it came to the concept which gives to the nervous system, central nervous system, and the brain the role of maestro of the body and center of consciousness, of thought and reason, creating a hierarchical relationship of the head and the brain related to the rest of the brain, the body. The advance of neurosciences, image technologies are capable of observing bodies in action and live organisms. They have been showing for a few decades how complex, not hierarchical, and interdependent is the relation between the exchanges between the nervous system and other cellular systems which compounds the body. Can you see this image? So we have been learning. So this is a Pacini corpuscle, a vibrational receptor which lies in the conjunctive tissues, such as in the bowels, in the muscles, and several other structures. This is not this is a photograph of a microscopic image, not a drawing. I'd like to propose a pause now. A pause for us to bring our attention to our own body for a few seconds. And to observe what is present now. What is present as a thought, as a feeling, physically. I will invite you to what I called, to the called somatization. As you observe what is present, little by little, bring your attention to the presence of the breath. This continuous pulse of empty and full. Observe and go along with this breathing for a brief while. Follow it. See if you can make yourself interested in your own breath, to being with it, to being in it. Observe your grounding through the feet in the ground or through the body in the chair, in the back. Bring your attention to what is supporting your body, the ground, the chair, and your body being supported. And then slowly bringing one hand to meet the other, bringing your palms together. What is the temperature you can feel between your hands? What else can you feel just from touching your hands together? Where are you present now? Then I propose we start rubbing our hands together slowly until we make a lot of heat. And when you feel that your hands are really hot, stop for a moment and get them apart a little bit and try to feel what's happening in the space between them. You may feel a smooth reverberation, vibration, a pulsing. You may feel nothing. And then choose one hand and grasp hold the wrist with the other body. And try to bring your attention, which is holding the wrist, and to what that hand feels and perceives. It might be volume, temperature, density, form. You don't have to name it, but feel it. See what the hand, feel what the hand is feeling. See what the hand is feeling. You can take a little time to leave the sensation. If you can move a little, it might help you. Small movements may help. And now I invite you to see that when the hand touches the wrist is also touching the hand. So placing your attention in the wrist, now place your attention in the wrist, which is touching the hand. Take our attention from the hand, which touches the wrist, to the wrist, which touches the hand. What does the wrist feel? How does it feel, this embrace from the hand? And if you feel like it, move a bit this duet, hand and wrist, around the space in front of you. Move it through the encounter. It is not the hand conducting the wrist, it is not the wrist conducting the hand, but it is a duet. Just around your space in small moves or whatever you feel like doing. Then slowly, taking our time, we will say goodbye to this encounter. And as slow as you can, release the hand and the wrist, letting both go, and bring your attention, like your focus, on the feeling of the hand which touched, and see how this sensation is different from the sensation of the other. What are you feeling in your hand that touched and in the other hand? The same way, your wrist. What do you feel in the list that was touched, which is the other list. Can we tell if this sensation, which you may or may not be feeling, is a species, a kind of feedback of cellular presence? Now, in your own time, we can come back. And now follow speaking a little bit about how the experiential anatomy approach from centering body-mind, from body-mind centering, the name suggests body-mind centering, it proposes a vision of the relationship between body and mind, which give flees from the Cartesian dualism and creates, to my scene, an epistemology and a poetry of cellular presence. According to Bonnie-Cohen, we can distinguish in the daily and learning processes two instances which work together in continuum. One of cells informing the brain, which you call bottom-up, and the other with this brain informing the cells, which you call top-down. Both instances alternate in different moments of the process of knowing something in a closed loop, which is the sensory motor loop. And it doesn't require our attention, it happens by itself. Now I will call these instances respectively of nervous knowledge from the brain to the cells and cellular knowledge from the cells to the brain. How do they work? And how do these two instances how do they work how do they make product presence? When the sensory stimuli come to us, they come first to the sensory organs from which they are transported to the sensorial nerves throughout the central nervous system, the brain and the medulla. And the brain receives these informations in its in the posterior part, the most primitive part. And after this, it registers them and interprets them, and it creates a motor within our frontal cortex, which is the more recent part of the brain, responsible for a lot of the more complex operation. This motor response is not necessarily muscle or skeletal, it may be thought, an image, a visceral move or an emotion. It is a response of the body to a stimuli in the encounter with the world. So I feel a breeze in my skin and I acknowledge it's cold. I listen to a sound and my cortex registers it and tells me there are kids playing in the street. There is one functional unit in this cycle which makes that the sensory aspect, stimuli, and the motor aspect, response, are always together, making it impossible to feel without acting and making it impossible to act without feeling. So we say, but it happens that this stimulus response system works with the support of a bunch of preconceived expectations that dictate what the system expects that will happen even before it happens, based on previous experiences already interpreted and registered in patterns of stimulus response within the frontal cortex. The system receives sensorial input and plans motor responses from a personal code of previously lived and experiences. This happens so that once we have a pattern of stimulus response that is developed, we can go back to it, and so control our experiences through habit, memory, and projection. The nervous system manages these operations and has the fundamental function of connecting past experiences and planning future objectives and foretelling what will happen, interpreting, constituting, and making a relation between the data of experience, and also registering new knowledges, integrating them to the data bank of our history. We cannot conceive of a life of complex beings like us without the existence of a recording system of patterns of stimulus response. It would be like we would have to reinvent ourselves from the zero at each fraction of a second without memory to survive. If I met a lion, it would possibly eat me before I could even realize it was a predator. So the specialization of nervous cells in a system, the nervous system, allowed us to survive within the complexification of life. However, this mode of working of the nervous system ends up by conducting us to a species of perception neurosis. Now, to use an expression from the researcher and neurologist Hubert Goddard, doing little by little so that we cannot reinvent new answers to what we perceive, because we are always perceiving the world the same way through the future of our personal history. And in this place, sentences Goddard, the imagination stops working and things become solid to one interpretation. So, paraphrasing Bonnie Cohen, to be able to live experiences, entirely new experiences, we need to give up the information we recognize so that all habits do not control the outcome anymore. And we need to open force that a new cellular perspective can replace the imagination in movement in the present. Otherwise, the perceptive patterns will always make so that the pre-sensory focus within a determined spectrum and possible new learnings are always filtered by the same lenses, conditioning what can be perceived to what is already known. If we reconnect with the cellular experience with the present, this allows for new ways of perception, so that we are not always in some way perceiving the world around us. First we need to abandon the safety of the objective look, the safety that recognizes and gives names and opens an abyss within the senses, as Goddard proposes, an abyss of new possibilities of experience. It happens many times when we learn some new activity, something for which we have no tools of recognition, such as learning to speak a new language or playing an instrument or moves in a new dance. Experiences of dislocation and of exchanging lived current before nature, of artworks and of the contact with the social cultural difference also defy our codes of recognition of the nervous system, making the body available for new cellular sensory experiences. But how else is it possible to invite this knowledge which emerges directly from cellular experiences? We do not have the habit of placing our attention in what happens in this level, which is so intimate, so microscopic of the process of knowledge. This operation requires practice, we are not habituated to operate in this way. I cite Diego Pizarro. The not knowing is in itself a search, an opening of the back part, posterior part of the nervous system, which creates a search that aims to alleviate the knowledge that is already ingravated in the body, and which sends instructions to the other part of the brain. And the general idea is to escape from the automatic answer, to regulate yourself and allow for unusual thought and action patterns can emerge and can help you better adjust your current moment. To activate a presence that is entered in this cellular knowledge, we need to leave a local perception of the cells just seeing themselves, and not leave from the frontal lobe of the brain witnessing what happens. We need to evoke the image of a cell in the brain. Evoking the image of a cell in the brain is different from directly imagining the cells. The cellular experience goes in a domain which gives emphasis to the reception of the world, of the place where you project upon it. We have to give up the safety of the objective look, the safety of having a name for all you see, which makes possible the me and the other. This requires an appetite to stay in the unknown, and the possibility of letting yourself navigate the disorientation between subjective and objective, of not knowing. I quote, "The more you can stay in not knowing, the more profound is the knowledge which emerges." We need an open listening to the undetermined signals of alteration of matter, of changes in its rhythms, densities, intensities, directions, temperature, pulsations, vibrations. Bonnie also usually says that the cells know what to do and how to do it, and they give feedbacks. We just have to know how to listen to it. We're talking here about vibrational communication of listening and resonance. Resonance is known here as a phenomenon of syntony between vibrational patterns. We consider it is an essence of a quality of bodily attention for which you do not have a good translation in Portuguese, with awareness, which talks of this quality of corporal attention, and that goes through the vibrational fields and is able to syntonize with them, to resonate with them, to pay attention, to observe, and to take consciousness of something in terms of awareness, is to be in vibrational syntony with this something. And self-awareness would be then the ability of being present in what happens within your own body, of syntonizing with your own vibrational frequencies. Thomas Hanna says awareness is a somatic function in first person which acts through the motorial sensorial system organizing experience. To focus in the sensation of a specific part, the body creates motor inhibition and lets in second plan all the sensorial motorial information, which is not the focus of attention. So you can direct your attention to specifically feel something. And even if you are not actively directioning our awareness, it is always in activity, be it conscious or not. It is always guiding and organizing the somatic processes, embracing every experience as a species of base conscious anchored in the body. And we can practice the ability to listen to this base consciousness. invoking this cellular presence can be achieved through the cellular touch, through respiration practices, sonorization practices, and free movement practices. Active imagination is often used, and imagination here is not used in the sense of fantasy or something that doesn't exist, and it's not experimented as a mental process. Imagination brings forth bodily sensations, and in this way it can create bodily inventions in your body. In this sense, it can create realities lived by the body, which blurs the frontier between real and fiction. I like to bring to mind the mirror neurons, which are neurons that activate when we even see or imagine some action. They are activated by imagination itself. So research is around mirror neurons suggests the hypothesis that imagination is a form of simulation, going from the presupposed that a simulation allows us to feel the imaginated situation as a reality. Do the frontiers between reality, fiction, simulation, and imagination exist a priori, or do they depend on the way of engaging, of presential engaging, which is in play? I believe that imagining and simulating a situation in the body to the point you feel it as real is an ability of creating a new bodily reality. This is also experienced in the body-mind centering practices of visualization, somatization, or corpo bodilization. Visualization is when images and maps, mental maps, orient the body. Like I see an anatomic image drawing and I try to feel it in my body. Somatization is when the movement and the bodily movement are focused by a mental attention, which gives it shape. So I make a movement and I take my focus to that movement to see what emerges, what feeling emerges. And the bodilization, this is a word that has been fashioned, bodilization, is when there is no more guide or witness, no search of doing or thinking, when you are simply in the direct cellular experience. The dance researcher and practitioner of body-mind center Lia Rodrigues reminds us that bodilization is the process of cognitive routines in the organisms, the adaptational processes between living organisms and their environment. In other words, cells are always bodilizating in its procedures of survival, in the breath, in feeding, in mating, in escaping threats. We don't have to think about any of this. So this is bodilization. But if bodilization is a process which happens by itself, I ask myself, if bodilization is a natural process in the body, if the cells are continuously bodilizing themselves, why do we have to authorize that? Why do we have to train this ability? That's because sometimes it is common for us to fall into an automatic repetition of patterns that are unconscious. Remember I talked about perceptive neurosis regarding Godard. We can go into a lack of syntony, a disharmony, which makes us incapable of functioning as we think we could. So when we become conscious of these processes, we can eliminate this lack of syntony, allowing the cellular knowledge to come from the shadows of the inconscient as insights. And when called to presence, the knowledge of the cellular communities has the possibility of self-regulating the dysfunctional and traumatic processes which are solidified physiologically. Once this new presence comes to the conscious mapping, it can be reabsorbed into the unconscious and incorporated as a new pattern. This is how continuously in micrograms of micro sensations of microorganisms throughout the immense microcosms of our own body-mind. Learning something new in this perspective is living this dialogue between the cellular presence present and the past experience which is registered in our nervous system. The cellular knowledge is a sensible experience of intimate recognition with the cellular vitality and body eroticism. Eroticism in the sense preconized by the feminist writer Audre Lorde, as in that which says that regarding the intensity and the fullness in which we feel when we do anything. It's a gift, a present of our condition of living beings, living the intensity of the feeling and gambling on your vital creative potency. This is a counterpoint to the alienation of the body, which comes from the capitalist and mechanicist relationality system. So when I think about perceiving taste, knowledge of taste, or having knowledge, having sense, in Portugal's Portuguese, the verb to know is still used to refer to the flavor of things. It's interesting to think about this relationship between knowing something and savoring something, feeling its taste. To know and to taste, they make in the Latin origin of the word a wisdom, a relationship of knowing and thinking, feeling within the body. As per the philosopher and somatics researcher Don Johnson, there has always been two different ways of technology which are Holden comes from the bodily wisdom, the technology of alienation and the technology of authenticity. The technology of alienation would be a basic male historic conquer based on the empiricism mediated, that is, in data received through instruments and codificated in mathematical language. It corresponds to the process developed by the scientific method based in the observation of stars in the world, which escapes the perception of senses. Knowledge in this case is in the case of experts, is in the hands of experts. The technology of authenticity for it, on the other hand, is based on the immediate empiricism. Its prototype is natural science, and the experts are those who pay attention to what is present, who open their eyes. The informations which are readily available to them, to their senses, demand time and effort dedicated to understanding. Johnson suggests this technology corresponds to the kind of knowledge developed by women throughout their pre-birth, taking care of one another and of the community from the direct observation of the cycles of nature, the use of herbs and bodily readings. This knowledge was configured as an authority, sensual authority from woman, connecting body and nature, microcosm and macrocosm. And this is one of the reasons women were cruelly persecuted as witches throughout Europe. Johnson calls attention to the absolute predomination of woman between the between people who funded and practiced somatic methods, and says that this technology is based on immediate empirism in the abilities of seeing and feeling, curiously seems like the witch's craft from the 16th century. The ecofeminist author Caroline Marchand says that the Cartesian mechanicist philosophy changed the social paradigm, devaluing the authenticity technology, replacing an organic vision of the world, which saw nature, woman, and earth as protecting mothers, by another which degraded them to the category of permanent resources, taking any restriction, any ethical restriction from its exploration. The author calls attention to a history supported in the abuse of researches relating the capitalist exploration of the natural world to the exploration of woman and associating it to the witch hunt and destruction of environment. So in conclusion, I defend the legitimation of a cellular knowledge which inhabits and soul, and which in a way goes in the counter other way of some classical parameters within modern Western and scientific societies, such as the notions of rationality, logic, objectivity, and separability, and the dualisms, subject and object, body and mind, nature and culture, the politics of pimping of the capitalistic colonial system go on and encouraging the listening of this knowledge, this vibrational knowledge of the body, this authorizing its wisdom and promoting relationships of use and abuse of bodies, humans and not humans. I believe that investing in this recognition is an act of resistance, of micropolitical resistance. We need active micropolitics which contribute to the continuous decolonization of the patterns sedimented in the unconscious, denumbing this ability of connecting vibrational knowledges within the worlds, disobstructing the crossing of the body through the resonances and interferences, through the fluids and densities of the forces still to come. We need theories and practices which embrace the not knowledge, the not knowing, the indetermination, and practice more the listen than the speaking, more the doubt than the certainty. We need micropolicies that reconnect us with the eroticism, creator of life in its continuous movement of generating new existential sceneries. I'd like to invite you to imagine just a moment while I share my screen. Can you see it? So one of these images is of bone tissue in micro detail, and the other is a satellite image of a lake called Amadeo, I think in Australia. Here one in the lung tissue, and here the river in Oman. We talked about patterns, behavioral patterns, thought patterns, attentional patterns, perceptional patterns, and there are shape patterns. This is it. So this is all. Thanks. Thank you very much, Dani. Very evocative, very inspiring in your speech. Thank you very much. Now the microphone will be open for whoever has questions, comments, observations. There's always a link in the chat when you can ask your questions. Thank you a lot, Dani. So if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. I have a question. Dani, thank you so much. This was a great collective hypnosis to listen to you. I am a researcher of attention, and it brought me to another level with your speech. Thank you immensely. My question is, you've talked about how in modern culture we expect different results operating with the same filters, and what body mind center proposes is reprogrammation in the cellular level. So it's the cell witnessing the world, not the centralized, masculinized, westernized mind that witnessing. So from this cellular reorientation, inusitated things may happen. So I think I understand. Okay. So my question is, what kind of inusitated movements happened to you along your paths? What happened? What was transformed with this study, with this programming, with this work? Thanks for your question. Well, it transformed me a lot. I'm a ballerina. I have been for many years. I've had a practice of ballerina choreography teacher. But when I found Body Mind Center, I felt a kind of paradigm revolution. I thought, I don't really know my body, because we also work a lot and a lot of somatic practices within the muscle skeleton system. So neuromuscle is the top-down information from the nerves to the to our system, movement system. We need this, and we do a lot of stuff like that. And Body Mind Center proposes this training of this listening. I joke saying it is a magic listening, that we're learning magic, because it is a very fine listening from my own body. So to understand when I'm actually hurt, which is the tissue which is actually hurt. So trying to inquire to that tissue, what can I do to heal? A lot of times without having to see the doctors, who usually don't know anything about little injuries of ballerinas, of who works with the body. I'm sorry if there's any orthopedician here or doctor, but I felt my practice changed a lot in the quality of my perception, the listening of my own body and of the body of others, like observing someone and quickly understanding their vibrational patterns, for instance, and noticing something we study a lot, the lack of balance in the nervous system, when it tends more to this parasympathetic system or the sympathetic system, and finding ways of balancing them, of balancing with bodily and artistic practices. My challenge has been also, how do I use this within a context of artistic creation? I don't know if this answers completely. Thank you. I have a lot of curiosity in knowing this work, to see how a behavior change is possible. So if this is about reassuming our common cellular ancestrality, how do reordering our perception of this place can change my body my behavior regarding racism, for instance. So I'd be very happy if you have any evidence from other researchers who are also researching changes in behavior from these changes in attention. I can look into that. There are several practice and people practicing and researchers. Diego Bizarro himself has a thesis which is called a Brazilian researcher has a thesis called something like Poetic Anatomy, a huge thesis which is very interesting. There are several works in this thematic. We can connect later and I'll send them to you. There's a question in the chat. Thank you, Kiran. He asks if you can talk a little more about how you see the relation, the importance of attentional gestures in the practice. If this would be their name, the gestures in the practice. Well, there are a lot of attentional practices, and there are a lot of ways of understanding what attention is. I talked a little about awareness, and it is a word that is hard to translate to Portuguese. There are those who call it bodified attention or focused attention or consciousness of the body. There is not a very good, easy translation, but awareness is this practice of attention. I believe attention that is based on your body. Awareness happens. I mean, good or bad, corporal bodilization isn't anyone's privilege. We're all here bodilizating, we're all bodies. But the idea of re-bodilization is how we re-bodify almost as a coming back to our origin of knowing in the act of knowing, which is not coming back to the past, it's coming back to the present, okay, in the act of knowing, so that we can pay attention, but not a mental attention, a body attention, an attention which several times does not have clarity. I remember when I started doing those practices from BMC, I started going crazy because BMC is a cycle of body-mind center. It's the abbreviation. I thought it's not possible. I can't feel my breath, my cellular breath. I can't get into touch, place my focus on this level of intimacy of my organism. I don't have this, I'm not able to do this. How can I do this? I was very bothered by it. But throughout time and throughout practice, I came to observe that something reveals itself or is built, which I think is a nice way of thinking about this. My thesis is about this, how we actually create, perform and recreate our own image and feel of our body as we exercise this, and we get in touch, not like several times people want to grasp, it's this or it's that, it's not this, it's not that, but it's not like that. So going back to attention, because I wandered off for a bit, I think this form of bodily attention is another kind of attention. It's also a practice. It's very common to see at times. Sometimes you see focus in what is happening between your hands and the person feels nothing. It's not that there's nothing there. It's that sometimes you're not connected in the attentional vibration syntony, remembering that awareness regards coming into contact with the vibrational pattern, to taking your focus there. Sometimes you're not able to do that. Sometimes you're all over the place in your head, and sometimes I can't get into that frequency, and then I feel nothing. So it is an attention, but it is a specific quality of attention which we work on. Not all the time, because we also play of alternating. When I talked about there's visualization, you see an image or you think about an image. So there's another quality of attention, and you seek it in your body. There are different paths between qualities of attention, but the most search and practice attentional quality is the awareness. And it is very common to see people or ourselves in moments when we are unable to go into awareness. We are unable. We cannot get into the vibrational syntony with whatever is going on around us. I'm Kiran. I asked the question. Thank you for all your talk. I asked because I am researching attention, and I just came to realize there are a lot of studies that, well, it's an infinite subject. I hadn't realized that, and in a class, I had this insight. I was a swimmer for several years. So we used to swim a lot for a long time or a long distance. Now, in the time I didn't have this conscience, but when I finished those big distance bouts, I was in a state of awareness that I can't even describe. Like, I had the conscience of what was happening in my body, around me, everything surrounding it. So at 17, I met an Indian. I started meditating and having physical and meditative. I started having the same experiences meditating, which I had swimming. Then I started swimming. Then I started dancing. And in dance, I started finding the same state, this state which might be called pre-linguistic, pre-symbolic, of affection, where attention, and this thing you talk about awareness, I talk a lot about awareness as being conscious or having consciousness of something. In Portuguese, usually we think about it like in another sense, but to being conscious in this sense of awareness, I like the sense of the term. And in the study of attention, there is this talk about those attentional gestures, some of which you proposed. The tracking is happening, this change. So this diminution of the distance between focus is a lot of what happens in the somatic experience, in these practices of presence, of attention. Because this is what I wanted to know. What you answered was so close of what I was thinking about. Thank you a lot. So I think this is very right, and this is it. And you brought up a very interesting issue about meditation. I don't think I mentioned it, but I consider this practice, it's not called this meditation, but it is a very meditational practice, in the sense, meditation in the sense of opening the space of the in-between thoughts, habitating this act of now knowing and thinking and shifting it between them and alternating the rhythm. And what you said about the physic activity, about the state you found, the body-mind center takes me to this place. I feel at times like I'm in trance, in a kind of trance, like I took something and I just did a practice, but it's so deep. I would say even spiritual. It's the closest I'd call a spiritual practice to myself. It resonates like that. And your talk resonated with that. Thank you. I'd like to ask a question. Valeria has her hand up, but this is the last question we will receive because we are on time. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very thankful to Anna, and to Camila, and everyone who organized this. I loved it. I would like to ask, I'm even a little bit, I don't know how to ask this. I'm afraid of coming out as twisting your words. I have practiced contact improvisation for several years, yoga, etc. But my profession, I'm a teacher in a university here in the south of Bahia, and I work in a field which is called social management. I've been working for several years with processes of communal development, processes of involving people with common goals, let's say. Saying more simply, I've been working for several years with a process of trying to avoid logocentrism. We try, but we end up excluding a lot of people who don't have academic formation and etc. I just want to ask, I don't want to present myself, just to give you context, but my question, one part of you brought up the point of how our receptors, our brain receptors, our central nervous system receptors, have a tendency of repeating the same interpretation of what is lived, to the point where we can even not cease having new experiences because everything is interpreted by what happened in the past. So my question regards the first question, which was asked by Anna, about the connection with behavior, with change in behavior. What we say a lot within our theoretical schemes, our theoretical schemes come before anything we can directly experience. In the experiences were worldly experiences, and that our theoretical lenses promote the same effect you referred to. We can't find anything new because the theory we already have comes before what we see. So my question finally is, do you think it is possible to overcome this microcellular dimension, which you never actually thought about other processes that were not those of the microcosm, not their atoms and such? Because in the level of life of cells, I ask, is it legitimate intellectually? Like, is it valid? To make an analogy between the need of us to stay in the not known on the cellular level, to the some necessity or to staying in the not known in the theoretical level to change what we can live. I don't know if I'm going too far. I'm sorry if I am. That's great. Thank you for your question. I'm here trying to see how to answer it. I think let me go back. When I talked about the functioning of the perceptual cycle, many times this is a closed cycle, and it's a necessary cycle. Like I said about the lion, we needed the cycle, this data bank of stimulus response. We have to have it. We see the baby and it learns not to touch the stuff and such. You learn. You learn about the dangers and you put that into your data bank. I say this because at times I feel this in myself, within myself, like if it's one or the other. But that's not the case. It's just that maybe our lives in today's world values these functions too much: memory, focus, interpretation, these values which are functions of the nervous system and do not value the functions or activities that come from what I'm calling cellular knowledge. One always ends on the other in a closed loop, but so does art. Not that every artist is someone who, but many experiences in art are a search of getting into this domain of something that is not an exact theory, which contains a gray field, which has something, poetry. I think there's an immense field of actions we live, which give privilege to this kind of knowledge, a knowledge that is not in some way satisfying our unending appetite to understand and grasp everything and give it back. So I do think there are ways to think about this theory, and several feminists like Karen Bahari, Anna Singhi, and several others, with Sian Espre, I read today The Tale of the Spider. They will be people who are talking about this within the scientific world, within academia. How can we not be locked in the bounds of concepts and establish theories, and how to have a transition more connected to a practice in the world, in the bodified into the world. I'm simplifying a lot what they say, each one says it their way, but I think the feminist theorics are a good path to think about this. Someone from Bahia talked about Luciana Fernandes. Kira. Luciana Fernandes is a person who does this. She does theory from a place of absolute experience from her body. that there might be people who read and say, I can't get this, but she's there, but betting on experience to develop something that presents itself as a theory. So I don't know if I was able to ask her question. I'm very thankful for her answer. I think, yes, you did. The point is that there exists an analogy, the fact that there are people doing this. I'm thankful for your answer, and your some references I didn't know before. There are certainly very good clues to follow. Thank you very much. Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot, Dani. It was a very inspiring seminar. It really moving. So this conversation will go on next month on July 2nd. We'll have a seminar with Christine, dance therapist, who has a very nice work with movement. You are all very, very much welcome next month. And the recording of this seminar will be made available in English and Portuguese on the YouTube channel. We will also give you the links to subscribe to next month's seminary. And one question regarding this, is it possible that people not subscribe to the course watch these recordings? Yes, they will be open to mass. Thank you a lot to Camila, to the organization, to everyone organizing everyone who is here. Thank you for the space of sharing. This is always very good, very rich. Whenever we go back to this, we learn a lot. Thank you. Thank you a lot.